The red ships moved through space like a swarm of deadly insects. They had been moving this way for 300 years, taking every world they found. The Empire had grown strong by eating other civilizations, and now they owned most of the galaxy. Admiral stood on the bridge of his warship, looking out at another dead world. Smoke still rose from the burning cities below. His forearms were folded behind his back as he read reports on his data pad. The Federation was gone now. Their beautiful crystal cities had been turned to dust in just a few months. The warrior clans, who everyone feared, had given up after watching their home world burn. The Admiral's ship was called the. It was huge and black, with weapons that could destroy a moon. Around it, thousands of other ships waited in perfect lines. They all looked the same, dark and evil, like metal sharks in the void of space. Commander walked up to the Admiral. Her skin was covered in scales, and her yellow eyes glowed in the dim light of the bridge. She carried a report in her clawed hands. "Admiral," she said, her voice making a hissing sound, "our scouts have found the fleet. They are waiting at the Nexus gate with all their remaining ships." Turned his pale eyes toward her. His face looked like it was made of white bone, with sharp teeth that showed when he smiled. "How many ships do they have?" "About 15,000 vessels, sir. It is a big force, but nothing compared to what we have." The Admiral nodded slowly. The war machine had grown fat on victory. Their fleet now had hundreds of thousands of ships. Every world they took gave them more resources to build more weapons, more soldiers, more death machines. This would be the last battle. After the Nexus gate fell, no one would be left to fight them. "Tell all fleet commanders," ordered, "we move forward when the sun rises on the command ship. They will see the full power of our empire before they die." Bowed her head. "It will be done, Admiral." As she walked away, looked back at the burning world below. He remembered when his people had been weak, living on one small planet, always afraid of stronger races. But they had learned to be cruel. They had learned that mercy was weakness. They had learned that only the strong deserved to live. The first world they took had been easy. The people there were peaceful, with no weapons worth talking about. They had landed their troops and taken everything in a single day. The survivors became slaves. Their children were raised to serve the Empire. That was how it always went. Some worlds fought back hard, some gave up quickly, but they all fell in the end. They had better weapons, better ships, and no mercy in their hearts. Now, 300 years later, they ruled 2,000 star systems. Billions of aliens worked in their mines and factories. Their children were taught to worship gods and speak language. The old cultures were dying, replaced by the sameness of imperial rule. But there was still one more fight to win. The Collective was the last big power standing against them. They had silver ships that moved like dancers in space, and their people could speak to each other with their minds. They had gathered every remaining free ship from across the galaxy. Survivors from the Federation, the last warriors, rebels from a dozen conquered worlds. All of them were going to make their final stand at the Nexus Gate. The Nexus Gate was special. It was a place where several space routes came together, like roads meeting at a crossroads. Whoever controlled it could control travel to the center of the galaxy, where the richest worlds waited. They knew this. They were going to fight there because they had no choice. Walked to the big window at the front of his bridge. Outside, he could see his fleet preparing for battle. Supply ships moved between the war vessels, bringing fuel and weapons. Troop carriers held millions of soldiers, ready to land on any world that needed conquering. Scout ships darted around the edges, watching for enemies. The Admiral had fought in hundreds of battles. He had seen entire species wiped out. He had ordered the destruction of worlds that refused to surrender. He felt no guilt about any of it. This was how the universe worked. The strong took from the weak. They were the strongest, so they deserved everything. But something felt different about this battle. Maybe it was because it would be the last one. After the Fell, there would be no more big wars to fight, just small rebellions to crush, and those were boring, was a warrior. He lived for the challenge of defeating worthy enemies. Admiral called his communications officer. We are receiving reports from all sectors. The fleet is ready to move. Good, said. How long until we reach the Nexus gate? 3 days at current speed, sir. 3 days. Then it would all be over. The galaxy would belong to the Empire and peace would reign. The peace of the grave, perhaps, but peace nonetheless. What none of them knew was that their movements were being watched. Far away, in a part of space that all the maps called empty, ancient machines were waking up. These machines had been sleeping for millions of years, waiting for this exact moment. The massive energy from the approaching fleets had triggered sensors that were older than any civilization in the galaxy. Deep in the darkness between stars, systems that had been dead since before life began were starting to come alive again. Warning signals raced through hidden networks. Ancient protocols were being activated. The thought they had won the galaxy. They thought nothing could stop them now, but they were wrong. Something had been sleeping in the dark, waiting for the right time to wake up, and that time was now. The war seemed won, but the real battle was about to begin. The Battle of Nexus Gate had been going on for 6 days, and the space around the gate was filled with fire and death. Broken ships floated everywhere like metal gravestones. The Collective and their allies fought like wild animals backed into a corner, because they knew this was their last chance. Captain stood in the command center of her ship. Her ship was beautiful, made of silver metal that seemed to glow with its own light. Around her, the bridge crew worked at crystal controls that hummed with energy. She could feel the thoughts of her people through her mind, a gift that all shared. But right now, those thoughts were full of fear and pain. "Give me a report," she said, her voice carrying the musical sound that her people were known for. Her tactical officer looked up from his station. His uniform was torn and burned from the long battle. "Captain, we have lost the ships, all of them. The defense wing only has 3 ships left that can still fight. Our own fleet is down to 40%. Felt each lost ship like a knife in her heart. Every vessel that died carried hundreds of souls, maybe thousands. Families, children, elders who held the memories of their worlds. They had offered surrender terms, but everyone knew what that meant. Slavery for those who lived, death for those who resisted, and the slow murder of everything they loved. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "the Admiral wants to talk to you." The main screen lit up, showing the face of Admiral. His white skin looked like bone, and his 4 arms moved behind him as he spoke. His eyes were cold, like chips of ice in the void. "Captain," he said, his voice coming through the translation system with mechanical clicks and hisses. "You have fought well. I respect your courage, but this battle is over. Surrender now, and I promise your crews will be treated with honor." "And our worlds?" asked, though she already knew what he would say. "Will serve the Empire as they should. Fighting us is useless, Captain. You have done your best, but the war is finished." The screen went dark. The bridge fell quiet except for the sound of alarms and the distant rumble of weapons fire. Closed her eyes and reached out with her mind to touch every person under her command. She felt their fear, their hope, their sadness. They would fight to the end, not because they thought they could win, but because giving up meant letting evil triumph. "All ships," she said into her communicator, "this is our final hour. We do not fight for victory anymore. We fight so that someone will remember we stood against the darkness and did not give up." The fleet came at them again like a wave of black death. Their ships moved in perfect lines, firing weapons that cut through the Allied vessels like hot knives through butter. The beautiful silver ships of the exploded in flowers of light. The proud warships of the clans, built for honor and glory, became drifting hulks filled with the dead. One by one, the great ships fell silent. The itself was dying, its hull cracked open in many places, air leaking out into space. Half the crew was dead or wounded. The ship's power was failing. Captain watched her tactical display as the last few Allied ships were destroyed. A heavy cruiser, surrounded by enemies, fired its weapons until the very end before disappearing in a ball of fire. And science vessel, never meant for war, rammed itself into a destroyer, taking both ships into death together. "Captain," her weapons officer called out, "we have lost main power. Weapons are offline." "Life support is failing on decks 7 through 12, reported another voice. "Hull breaches on all levels. We have maybe 10 minutes before total structural failure." Nodded, she had known it would end this way, but they had fought well. They had made the pay for every system, every world, every life. "All hands," she said over the ship's communication system, "prepare for final transmission." She turned to the communication station. "Send this message on all frequencies as far as our transmitters can reach. Let the galaxy know what happened here." The message was simple but important. It told how the free peoples of the galaxy had made their last stand at the Nexus Gate, how they had fought against impossible odds, how they had died free rather than live as slaves. It was a message of defiance that would travel to the far edges of space, carried by radio waves that would outlive them all. The shook as more weapons hit its dying hull. Emergency lights flickered and went out. The air grew thin and cold. "It has been an honor serving with you all," said to her crew. Then the ship's reactor finally failed, and they joined the graveyard of heroes floating around the Nexus Gate. Admiral watched from his command bridge as the last enemy ship died in a brief flash of light. The battle was over. The galaxy was his. 2,000 star systems, billions of workers, enough resources to keep the Empire strong for thousands of years. "Signal all fleet commanders," he ordered. "The Nexus Gate is ours. Begin deployment of occupation forces." "Yes, Admiral," Commander replied. "What are your orders regarding the survivors?" "The usual. Those who can work will be sent to labor camps. Those who cannot will be disposed of. Make sure our victory is recorded properly. Future generations should know what happens to those who oppose the Empire." As the Great Fleet began to spread out through the Nexus Gate, heading toward the rich worlds of the galactic center, none of them noticed the small changes happening in distant space. Ancient sensors, hidden in the darkness between stars, had been watching the battle. The massive explosions and energy releases had triggered systems that had been sleeping since before any of the current races had learned to make fire. Deep beneath the surface of a small, blue world in an unremarkable solar system, machines older than memory began to stir. Warning signals raced through networks that spanned the galaxy, carried by technology that made science look like stone tools. The message was simple: the time had come. In hidden bases scattered throughout the cosmos, beings who had slept for millions of years began to wake up. Their ships, built with science that could remake reality itself, powered up for the first time in geological ages. Their weapons, capable of destroying stars, began their startup sequences. The thought they had won the greatest victory in galactic history. They believed nothing could challenge their power now, but they were wrong. The real war was about to begin, and they had no idea what was coming for them. In the ruins of the Nexus Gate, among the wreckage of heroes, something stirred in the darkness. The galaxy's true protectors were waking up, and they were very, very angry. Lieutenant Jake had been watching empty space for 3 years. His job was to sit in a small metal station at the edge of Earth's solar system and look for anything unusual. In all that time, the most exciting thing he had seen was a lost asteroid. The observation post was tiny, just 2 rooms and a bunch of computers. It floated alone in the dark, far from Earth, far from Mars, far from anywhere people lived. Jake and his partner, Sergeant Hayes, were the only humans for millions of miles. "This is boring," Jake said to himself, checking the sensors for the 1,000th time. 3 years of staring at nothing. I should have taken that job on the moon base. Looked up from her workstation where she was fixing the power generator. At least it is quiet here. No politicians yelling at us. No traffic jams. No crowds of people, just us and the stars. Jake was about to answer when every alarm in the station started screaming at once. The main computer screen lit up like a Christmas tree, showing energy readings that made no sense. "Are you seeing this?" "What the hell?" she whispered, her hands flying over the controls. "Those energy numbers are crazy. What kind of ships make readings like that?" The screen showed two huge fleets fighting a war in space. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers across the void, and the energy waves were so strong they were messing up the station's equipment. "I count more than 100,000 ships," Jake said, his voice tight with shock. "This is way beyond anything in our files. We need to tell Earth right now." The battle went on for days. They could see it with their own eyes as bright flashes of light in the stars. When it finally ended, only one fleet was left. The dark ships formed perfect patterns as they started moving toward the center of the galaxy. "The unknown fleet is changing direction," reported, her voice barely louder than a whisper. "They are heading toward our part of space. Jake, they are coming this way." Both of them understood what this meant. Earth had no weapons that could fight technology this advanced. Humanity had barely learned to travel between planets. Their best warships were like toys compared to what they had just watched. "We have to warn them," Jake said, reaching for the communication controls. "Maybe they can get some people away from Earth before those things arrive." But as he started to send the emergency message to Earth, something strange happened. Deep under the surface of the moon, in rooms that had been sealed shut for millions of years, old machines began to turn on. The energy waves from the distant battle had woken up systems that had been sleeping since before humans existed. Dr. Samuel was the chief scientist at the Lunar Research Station. He had spent his whole career studying the mysterious structures buried under the moon's surface. The geometric patterns carved into the ancient metal were unlike anything from Earth's history, and the material itself seemed to break the laws of physics. "Doctor," his assistant called out, "you need to see this. The structures are making some kind of energy field." Samuel rushed to the observation window, where he found the normally dead alien buildings glowing with soft blue light. The symbols carved into their surfaces were moving and changing, like they were responding to something far away. "Have you ever seen anything like this before?" asked Captain Roy Williams, the station commander. "Never," Samuel replied, his voice full of wonder and fear. "But our tests say these structures are over 65 million years old. Whatever built them was here long before humans learned to walk." The structures kept pulsing with growing brightness, and all through the solar system, similar installations began to wake up. On Mars, under the ancient city ruins, sleeping power plants came back to life. In the asteroid belt, mining stations reported that their equipment was detecting massive energy sources from places no one knew existed. "Doctor," his assistant said, "the structures are not just turning on, they are building something." The first ships began to come out of the lunar factories like butterflies from their cocoons. They were sleek and deadly looking, with hulls that seemed to bend light around them. Their energy readings were as strong as the alien fleets they had detected in the outer systems. Similar things were happening throughout the solar system. The ancient installations on Mars began making ground weapons and vehicles. The hidden facilities in the asteroid belt started building mining and factory platforms that could strip a whole planet of resources in days. But the most shocking discovery came when the first of the awakened commanders made contact with Earth's governments. The transmission came through on every military frequency at the same time, spoken in perfect English, Chinese, Russian, and Arabic. "People of Earth," the voice began, calm and clearly human despite coming from impossible technology. "This is Admiral Kate speaking from the UES Defiant. The time has come to take back our galaxy." General Davis, head of Earth's military forces, stared at the communication screen in amazement. The woman speaking was obviously human, but her uniform was unlike anything he had ever seen, and the technology visible behind her was centuries ahead of anything Earth could build. "This cannot be real," he said to his aide, Colonel Lisa Porter. "Our best spaceships can barely reach Jupiter, and this woman says she commands a fleet." "Sir," Lisa replied, "we are getting similar messages from sites all over the world. The archaeological teams are reporting that the ancient structures are not just active, but they are making ships and weapons." On the moon, Doctor watched in amazement as the buried structures rose from the lunar surface, showing themselves to be massive shipyards that had been sleeping for millions of years. The size was incredible, each facility large enough to build vessels that made Earth's biggest space stations look like toys. "Samuel," his assistant called, "you need to see this. The structures are making more ships." More vessels emerged from the lunar factories every hour. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time, with hulls that seemed to be made of liquid metal and weapons that hummed with barely contained power. "This is impossible," Captain Williams said, watching the ships take shape. "6 months ago, I was running a research station. Now I am looking at technology that could probably destroy planets." "The galaxy is about to change," Doctor replied, touching the impossibly smooth hull material of one of the new ships. "The question is whether we are ready for what comes next." The ancient installations worked without stopping, building ships and weapons with technology that seemed more like magic than science. Hidden bases throughout the solar system came online, revealing themselves after millions of years of waiting. Earth's leaders tried to understand what was happening. The archaeological sites that had puzzled scientists for decades were revealing their true purpose. They were not ruins from some dead civilization. They were guardians, left behind by humanity's own descendants from the far future, sent back through time to protect their primitive ancestors when the greatest threat in galactic history finally appeared. The Empire thought they had conquered the galaxy. They believed nothing could challenge their power, but they were wrong. Earth's ancient protectors were waking up, and they had been preparing for this moment for over 60 million years. The real war was about to begin, and humanity was ready to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of. The first sign that everything had changed came when every military base on Earth got the same message at exactly the same time. The transmission was short, spoken in perfect English, Chinese, Russian, and Arabic, with math formulas that proved it was real. "People of Earth," the voice said, calm and clearly human despite coming from impossible technology. "This is Admiral Kate speaking from the UES Defiant. The time has come to take back our galaxy." General Davis, head of Earth's military, stared at the screen in shock. The woman speaking was human, but her uniform was like nothing he had ever seen. The technology behind her was hundreds of years ahead of anything Earth could build. "This is impossible," he said to his helper, Colonel Lisa Porter. "Our best spaceships can barely reach Jupiter, and this woman says she has a fleet." "Sir," Lisa replied, "we are getting reports from around the world. The teams studying ancient sites say the old structures are not just turning on, but they are making things." On the moon, Dr. Samuel watched in wonder as the buried structures rose from the surface, showing themselves to be huge shipyards that had been sleeping for millions of years. The size was incredible. Each factory was big enough to build ships that made Earth's largest space stations look like toys. "Samuel," his assistant called, "you need to see this. The structures are making ships." The first vessels came out of the lunar factories like metal birds hatching from eggs. They were smooth and deadly looking, with hulls that seemed to bend light around them. Their power readings were as strong as the alien fleets they had seen in the outer systems. The same thing was happening all over the solar system. The ancient sites on Mars began making ground weapons and vehicles. The hidden bases in the asteroid belt built mining platforms that could strip a planet of resources in days. But the most shocking news came when Admiral made direct contact with Earth's leaders. Her image appeared on the main screen in the White House War Room, where President John Carter sat with his advisors. "Mr. President," Admiral said, "I know this is hard to understand, but Earth has been protected by an advanced human civilization for longer than your species has existed. We are your descendants, sent back through time to make sure humanity survives the coming war." President Carter, surrounded by his military leaders, struggled to understand. "Admiral, time travel is impossible. Our scientists have proven this." "Mr. President," replied with a small smile, "your scientists are working with incomplete information. The technology that created us, that built the bases throughout your solar system, was developed by humanity's future descendants. We are here because we know this moment is crucial to our species' survival." The explanation that followed was both amazing and terrifying. In the far future, humanity had become a space-traveling civilization that controlled multiple galaxies. They had fought and won a war against the Empire, but the victory had cost millions of lives. To prevent the same tragedy from happening again, they had sent their most advanced military forces back through time to protect their primitive ancestors. "They have conquered most of the galaxy," continued, "but they do not know about Earth. They think this part of space is empty. That gives us a big advantage." General Davis leaned forward. "What kind of forces are we talking about, Admiral?" "Right now, we have about 50,000 ships being built, with more coming online every hour. Our ground forces number in the millions, all equipped with technology that makes the war machine look primitive." The news sent shock waves through Earth's governments. Humanity, the species that had just learned to explore its own solar system, was apparently destined to become the galaxy's strongest military power. The ancient guardians had been waiting for this moment, when the Empire had grown too confident and exposed themselves. "What do you need from us?" President Carter asked. "Volunteers," replied. "The ancient rules require that people from your time serve alongside us. We cannot fight this war alone. It must be your war too." Within hours, military recruitment centers around the world were overwhelmed with volunteers. The idea of defending Earth and freeing the galaxy from alien oppression had awakened something deep in the human spirit. Young men and women from every nation stepped forward, ready to serve alongside their mysterious guardians from the future. Captain Roy Williams was among the first to be chosen for the new Joint Command. Despite having no experience with advanced technology, his leadership skills and tactical thinking made him perfect for rapid promotion within the Guardian fleet. "This is incredible," he said to Doctor as they toured one of the newly built ships. "6 months ago, I was commanding a research station. Now I am being offered command of a ship that could probably destroy a planet." "The galaxy is about to change," replied, running his hands along the impossibly smooth hull material. "The question is whether we are ready for it." The training began immediately. Human volunteers were taken aboard the Guardian ships, where they learned to operate technology that seemed more like magic than science. The ships could travel faster than light without using jump gates. Their weapons could punch through any known defense. Their tactical systems could coordinate thousands of vessels across light years of space. Lieutenant Jake, the young man who had first detected the alien fleets, found himself promoted to tactical officer aboard one of the new human ships. "This is crazy," he said to Hayes, who had become an engineering specialist. "A month ago, we were watching empty space. Now we are preparing to fight aliens." "At least we have the best equipment," replied, studying the ship's power systems. "These reactors produce more energy than our entire planet uses in a year." But the most amazing discovery came when they learned about the galaxy's history. The ancient structures on Earth and throughout the solar system had been built by the same civilization that had left markers on thousands of worlds. Species across the galaxy knew the old stories about the predecessors, the mysterious beings who had vanished millions of years ago but had promised to return when tyranny threatened all life. "The warrior clans have legends about you," explained one of the Guardian officers to a group of human volunteers. "They call you the sleeping giants. They have prophecies about the return of the light bringers. Every free species in the galaxy has been waiting for this day." As word spread that the ancient guardians had returned, entire star systems began to rebel against rule. The carefully maintained order of the empire started to crumble as species that had been enslaved for centuries rose up in coordinated uprisings. Admiral, commanding the main human fleet from her flagship, watched the galactic situation display with satisfaction. Red markers showing control were disappearing daily, replaced by blue symbols of liberated worlds. "Admiral," her intelligence officer reported, "we are getting communications from survivors. Captain is alive, hiding in the Nexus Gate asteroid field with what remains of her fleet." "Excellent," replied. "Signal Captain Williams to meet with the. It is time to take back the Nexus Gate and establish a forward base in the galactic core." The human fleet was ready. 50,000 ships of incredible power, crewed by the descendants of Earth's future and volunteers from the present day. Their technology was so advanced that it made the Empire look like children playing with sticks and stones. Captain Williams stood on the bridge of his new command, the UES Retribution, watching as the fleet prepared for its first major operation. The ship was beautiful and terrible at the same time, its weapons capable of destroying entire fleets, its defenses able to withstand the firepower of a small star. "All ships report ready," his tactical officer announced. "Then let us go show the galaxy that humanity has returned," Williams said. The war was about to begin in earnest, and they had no idea what was coming for them. Admiral was reading reports about his empire's progress when the first attacks began. The forces had spread out across the galaxy, confident that no organized resistance remained. Their fleets were scattered, doing routine occupation duties and taking resources from conquered worlds. The humans struck without warning, their ships appearing out of nowhere like ghosts in the night. The first target was the system, where a small force was overseeing the mining of rare crystals. The attack lasted less than an hour, but in that time, the entire occupation force was destroyed, and the surviving people were freed from their prison camps. "How is this possible?" demanded, his four arms waving at the tactical display. "The reports describe ships using technology we have never seen. Their weapons cut through our shields like they do not exist." Commander, his most trusted advisor, studied the data with growing worry. "Sir, the attack patterns suggest a completely new player in the galactic arena. These ships appeared to use some form of instant travel, striking multiple targets at the same time across hundreds of light years." The Admiral's jaw clicked in frustration. "Have we identified the attackers?" "No, sir, but there are disturbing similarities to the ancient warnings in our history files. The old texts speak of a sleeping giant that would wake up when the galaxy was threatened by tyranny." Waved his hand dismissively. "Superstition. The ancient ones disappeared millions of years ago. This is some new alliance of the surviving species, nothing more." But as more reports came in, it became clear that this was no ordinary resistance movement. The attackers had technology that was centuries ahead of anything they possessed. Their ships could travel faster than light without using jump gates, their weapons could penetrate any known defense, and their tactical coordination was both impressive and terrifying. Captain Roy Williams stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching as his fleet prepared for the liberation of the system. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of training and combat, as he and his crew learned to operate technology that seemed more like magic than science. "Status report," he called out, his voice carrying the confidence that came from a string of victories. "All ships report ready, Captain," replied Lieutenant Jake, who had been promoted to serve as his tactical officer. "The Resistance has confirmed that the garrison is small. This should be a straightforward operation." Williams nodded, but his face remained serious. "Remember, people, we are not just fighting for Earth anymore. Every world we free, every life we save brings us closer to ending this war. But they will not stay scattered forever. They will adapt, they will gather their forces, and when they do, we need to be ready." The attack on was swift and decisive. The human fleet appeared in the system's outer reaches, their advanced sensors immediately finding every ship. The enemy vessels never had a chance to send a distress signal before they were destroyed, their crews dying without ever understanding what had killed them. But the real shock came when the Liberation fleet made contact with the survivors. The proud warrior clans, who had resisted the Empire longer than any other species, fell to their knees when they saw the human ships. "The Ancient Ones have returned," whispered Clan Chief, his face showing a mixture of awe and disbelief. "The old prophecies spoke of this day, when the sleeping Guardians would wake up to take back the galaxy." Williams felt a chill run down his spine. "Chief, we are not the Ancient Ones. We are humans from a small world called Earth." "No," replied, his voice filled with certainty. "You are the children of the Ancient Ones, returned to fulfill your destiny. The Old Ones left markers throughout the galaxy, warnings of the day when tyranny would threaten all life. They promised that, when that day came, their descendants would return to restore balance." The news that humanity's ancient guardians were known throughout the galaxy changed everything. As word spread of the human return, entire systems began to rebel against occupation. The carefully maintained order of the Empire began to crumble as species that had been enslaved for centuries rose up in coordinated uprisings. Admiral, commanding the main human fleet from the UES Defiant, watched the Galactic Situation Board with satisfaction. Red markers indicating control were disappearing daily, replaced by the blue symbols of liberated worlds. "Admiral," reported her intelligence officer, "we are receiving communications from the survivors. Captain is alive, hiding in the Nexus Gate asteroid field with the remains of her fleet." "Excellent," replied. "Signal Captain Williams to meet with the. It is time to take back the Nexus Gate and establish a forward base in the galactic core." The battle for the Nexus Gate was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Empire, finally recognizing the threat, had assembled a massive fleet to defend the strategic position. Over 200,000 vessels, the largest military force in galactic history, waited in perfect formation as the human fleet approached. Admiral, commanding from his flagship, watched the tactical display with growing dread. The human fleet numbered only 10,000 ships, but their technology was so advanced that numbers seemed meaningless. "Sir," reported his sensor operator, "the human vessels are not following any known tactical doctrine. They are approaching in small groups, apparently uncoordinated." "It is a trap," muttered, his shell gleaming under the bridge lights. "They are trying to draw us into a pursuit formation." But the humans had no intention of running. As the two fleets closed to weapons range, the true nature of their strategy became clear. Each human vessel was capable of engaging dozens of ships at the same time, their weapons systems so advanced that they could track and destroy multiple targets without any apparent strain on their power systems. The battle lasted 3 days, but the outcome was never in doubt. The fleet, despite its overwhelming numbers, was systematically destroyed. Ships that had conquered 1,000 worlds were reduced to debris, their crews dying in the vacuum of space while the humans pressed their attack with ruthless efficiency. Admiral, standing in the ruins of his command bridge, watched as his empire's greatest fleet was annihilated. Though his mighty dreadnought was one of the last ships remaining, its hull broken in dozens of places. "Sir," gasped his communications officer, "the humans are offering terms." The main display flickered to life, showing Admiral's calm face. "Admiral, I am Admiral Kate of the United Earth Forces. Your fleet has been defeated. Your empire is in ruins. Surrender now, and your surviving crews will be treated with honor." His jaw clicked in what might have been laughter. "You offer mercy to those who have conquered a galaxy." "I offer justice," replied. "The Empire's reign of terror is over. Your people can choose to be part of the new galactic order, or they can continue to resist and face destruction. The choice is yours." The proud admiral looked around his ruined bridge, at the crew members who had followed him through 100 campaigns. The war was over, and for the first time in 3 centuries, the Empire had been defeated. "We surrender," he said quietly, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. As the human fleet took control of the Nexus Gate, signals went out across the galaxy. The Empire, which had seemed invincible just months before, had fallen to a species that most galactic civilizations had never heard of. The age of human leadership had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. Captain Williams, now Admiral Williams, stood on the observation deck of the newly built Nexus station, watching as ships from a dozen liberated worlds arrived to pay their respects to their human liberators. The war had been won, but he knew that the real work was just beginning. Building a new galactic order based on freedom and cooperation would be far more challenging than defeating the Empire. The war had seemed won, but then humanity had entered the battlefield, and everything had changed forever.